What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for NFL Week 2. Final look.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to go over my top picks for this week's NFL slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, let's take a look at the quarterback position. I like Derek Carr from the Las Vegas Raiders playing the Arizona Cardinals, who have the absolute worst defense overall. They've given up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Now, Derek Carr scored 17 fantasy points in week 1. He was on the field for 100% of the snaps. He's going to be about 13% owned, projected at 20.4 fantasy points here in week 2. He's 6,200 DraftKings salary, 1,100 more on FanDuel. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 51.5 points scored in this game, with the Raiders favored by 5.5. So, a lot going for Derek Carr this week. Best possible matchup on paper. Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. He has Javonte Adams, Darren Waller. His salary's still pretty low, so I like Derek Carr here versus the Arizona Cardinals. The other quarterback that I like is Kyler Murray from the Arizona Cardinals playing the Las Vegas Raiders, who have the 8th worst defense overall. They give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Kyler Murray, he scored 21 fantasy points in week 1. He got 5 rush attempts. He's going to be about 6% owned, projected at 23.3 fantasy points here in week 2. He's 7,500 DraftKings salary, 1,000 more on FanDuel. So we know Vegas thinks there's going to be 51.5 points scored in this game. That's their over-under. And they have the Cardinals trailing by 5.5. So great matchup for Kyler Murray. Now, he's more expensive than Derek Carr, but I think he certainly has more upside with his rushing ability. So I like Kyler Murray here versus the Las Vegas Raiders. Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. So the guy just can't get away from on this slate. Just seems like he's priced down just a little bit too much, especially on DraftKings, is Saquon Barkley from the New York Giants playing the Carolina Panthers, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They give up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Saquon Barkley scored 36 fantasy points in week 1 off of 18 rush attempts and 7 pass targets. He was on the field for 83% of the snaps, touched the ball 50% of the time, going to be about 24% owned, projected at 19.3 fantasy points here in week 2. He's 7,300 DraftKings salary, 1,500 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 43.5 points scored in this game, with the Giants favored by 1.5. So great matchup here for Saquon Barkley. And his price is still relatively low, only 7,300 DraftKings salary. Compare that to Jonathan Taylor at 9,900 or Christian McCaffrey at 8,900. You're getting a running back who can put up 30 plus fantasy points for only 7,300 DraftKings salary. So I like Saquon Barkley here versus the Carolina Panthers.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching.
If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal,
All you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won.
And we'll send you $25 PayPal.
So it's that easy?
And we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video.
So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
Another running back that I like is Javonte Williams from the Denver Broncos playing the Houston Texans, who have the 6th worst defense overall. They give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Javonte Williams scored 21 fantasy points in week 1 off of 7 rush attempts, but he got 12 pass targets. So he got almost 20 touches in week 1. Now, he was only on the field for 58% of the snaps, but if he's going to be involved in the passing game, it's like you're getting a wide receiver and a running back in one player. He's going to be about 18% owned, projected at 16.7 fantasy points here in week 2. He's 6,500 DraftKings salary, 800 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 45.5 points scored in this game, and they have the Broncos favored by 10. So I do think this is going to be a game that Javonte Williams is going to be involved in the passing game, but he could also get a lot of rush attempts as this game develops if the Broncos get a touchdown lead or if they're ahead by 10, 14 points. So I like Javonte Williams here versus the Houston Texans. Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. So I like Davante Adams. He's 8,600 DraftKings salary, only 200 more on FanDuel. But another stud wide receiver that I like is Jamar Chase from the Cincinnati Bengals playing the Dallas Cowboys, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They give up the 9th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Jamar Chase scored 32 fantasy points in week 1 off of 16 pass targets. He was on the field for 100% of the snaps. He's going to be about 7% owned. So you compare that to Cooper Kupp at 12% or Davante Adams at 21%. So you're getting this stud at a lower price and lower ownership. And he's got just as much upside. He's projected at 18.8 fantasy points here in week 2. He's 8,000 DraftKings salary, 700 more on FanDuel. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 42 points scored in this game, with the Bengals favored by 7. So I like Jamar Chase here versus the Dallas Cowboys. Now, if you want to save some salary here, take a look at Christian Kirk from the Jacksonville Jaguars playing the Indianapolis Colts, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. Now, they've been good versus opposing wide receivers. The Colts have a good defense, but Christian Kirk, he scored 21 fantasy points in week 1 off of 12 pass targets. He was on the field for 91% of the snaps, going to be about 9% owned. He's projected at 14.1 fantasy points here in week 2. And I like this pick because he's only 5,700 DraftKings salary, 800 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 45 points scored in this game, with the Jaguars trailing by 3. So I know this could be a tough matchup here for Christian Kirk, but if he's going to get 8 to 10 to 12 pass targets, I think he's got pretty big upside here for his price tag. So I like Christian Kirk here versus the Indianapolis Colts.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL. NBA is right around the corner. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet. that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups. Now for right around the same price, I also like Jerry Jeudy and Tyler Boyd. Both of those guys have good matchups, and both of those guys got 7 pass targets last week, plenty of volume. Tyler Boyd especially only going to be about 2% owned, so I think that makes him a good sleeper pick here in week 2. But now if you're looking to save some salary at the wide receiver position, take a look at Greg Dortch from the Arizona Cardinals playing the Las Vegas Raiders, who have the 8th worst defense overall. They're middle of the pack defending opposing wide receivers. Greg Dortch scored 13 fantasy points in week 1 off of 9 pass targets. He was on the field for 91% of the snaps. He's going to be about 13% owned, projected at 10.2 fantasy points here in week 2. And I like this pick because he's only $3,500 DraftKings salary. He's $2,000 more on FanDuel. And we know Vegas thinks there's going to be 51.5 points scored in this game, with the Cardinals trailing by 5.5. So I like Greg Dortch here versus the Las Vegas Raiders. Okay, moving on to the tight end position. I just can't get away from this tight end here in week 2. The matchup is really good, his price tag is low, he's super talented, and his ownership is actually pretty low. So I like Darren Waller from the Las Vegas Raiders playing the Arizona Cardinals. This game is filled with good plays, definitely a game to stack here in week 2. So the Cardinals have the absolute worst defense overall. They give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Darren Waller scored 12 fantasy points in week 1 off of 6 pass targets. He was on the field for 84% of the snaps, only going to be about 7% owned, projected at 13.1 fantasy points here in week 2. He's $5,600 DraftKings salary, $1,200 more on FanDuel. So I know Javonte Adams got the bulk of the pass targets in week 1, but you got to imagine that they're going to start to double cover Javonte Adams, and that's going to free up Darren Waller. So I think it's going to be one of those flip-flop games where you got Javonte Adams going off, and at least 1 out of the 3, Darren Waller is going to have his day. His price tag is just too low for his upside and the matchup, and Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game, so I love stacking this game. So I like Darren Waller here versus the Arizona Cardinals. Now I also like TJ Hockenson from the Detroit Lions playing the Washington Commanders, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They've been pretty good versus opposing tight ends. TJ Hockenson scored 8 fantasy points in week 1 off of 7 pass targets. He was on the field for 91% of the snaps, going to be about 9% owned, projected at 10.9 fantasy points here in week 2. He's $4,700 DraftKings salary, $1,000 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 48.5 points scored in this game, and they have the Detroit Lions favored by 1.5. So I like TJ Hockenson here versus the Washington Commanders. And another tight end that I like is Tyler Higbee from the LA Rams playing the Atlanta Falcons, who have the 2nd worst defense overall. They give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Tyler Higbee, he scored 9 fantasy points in week 1 off of 11 pass targets. He was on the field for 94% of the snaps, going to be about 10% owned, projected at 10.4 fantasy points here in week 2. And he's only $4,200 DraftKings salary. He's $1,100 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 46.5 points scored in this game. and they have the Rams favored by 10.5. So great matchup here. He got a lot of volume in week 1. His price tag is low. So I like Tyler Higbee here versus the Atlanta Falcons.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NFL slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.